Good evening, Bills Mafia. Welcome to Buffalo Late Night. This is another edition of Buffalo Late Night on actually a beautiful Monday. It's been quite nice today. I know in Western New York, nice 72 degrees with a nice breeze. I am your host, Thomas DeLoss. You can find me at the Thomas DeLoss. Tonight we are going to be discussing 11 personnel versus 12 personnel, and how the new offensive additions can ultimately play a major role in the offensive output. Joining us tonight for the first time, we got two faces who I'm fairly confident you guys recognize. First, we got Aaron Quinn, who is the co-host of the Cover One Buffalo podcast with Greg Thompson. And we've got Ryan Talbot from the New York Upstate and Syracuse.com, as well as the co-host of the Shout Buffalo podcast, along with Matt Perino. Gentlemen, good evening.
Good evening.
Thanks for having us, Thomas.
Absolutely. Love both of your work. Super glad to have you guys on here. I know for anybody that may have saw, we were initially going to have Joe Marino. We will try to have him back another time. He had a couple scheduling conflicts. Totally understand. That guy is busy.
Yeah.
That being said, Buffalo Late Night, we announced last week. Again, super proud to announce that we are sponsored now exclusively by a local dentist from Rochester, a dentist for kids. That is Dr. Zach Mills and Travis Matthew. And you'll hear more about them later. Also, for everybody, because I have a tendency of every week forgetting to do this. Depending on what platform you're watching, whether it's Twitch or Twitter, Facebook, or YouTube, make sure you're hitting that subscribe button and that follow so you can get more updates as to when we're going live, what content we're providing, and who we're going to be chatting with. On top of that, if you're watching on YouTube, feel free. Come and join the chat. We'd love to hear what you think. Every week we got a few people that pop in, pop out. Love to hear if you have any suggestions, recommendations, and really just what your thoughts on what we're talking about. So that being said, gents, let's get into this. Today, we actually found out that Jordan Poyer will in fact be attending the mandatory minicamp. What are your initial thoughts on this? And does it lend itself to the thought that a contract potentially could be on the horizon?
Ryan, you could start.
Yeah, sure. It doesn't necessarily mean that a contract is on the horizon. It could mean that things are trending in a good direction, but really it's just a smart move by Jordan Poyer. He can show up. He doesn't have to do much. He can be off to the side working. We've seen some veterans do that. You're avoiding the fines. You're still showing up, being there for your teammates, and you're he doesn't really need to be there in terms of the install, anything like that. He knows the ins and outs of this defense, but he can help some of those young guys out. In my opinion, could an extension come down the line here sooner rather than later? Yes, but I don't necessarily think that that's what this means. It's just more so him avoiding fines at this point in time, in my opinion.
Yeah, I second exactly what Ryan's talking about. The modern NFL is not a place for holdouts, and they're not going to work, right? Like, there's no sense in losing the money, especially this time of year. To Ryan's point, this isn't the middle of training camp or anything like that where you have to come out and work hard and you're unsure about your future. This is mandatory camp. This is really a glorified practice period. There's more stuff that they can't do than that they can do according to the CBA. So it's good on him on his side to show up and say, hey, I'm going to make a good faith effort to be here. I want to be part of this team. Either way, whether they get extension done, Jordan Poyer is part of the 2022 Buffalo Bills. And when he needs to show up, he's going to show up. And when he needs to be there and play football, he's going to do it at a high level. And so I think more is being made out of this than needs to be because it's been a slow offseason for the Bills. Things have gone well. And so there's not a lot of stories right now. And mandatory minicamp is a difficult thing to cover because there's not a lot you're going to get out of it. And so this story's probably gotten a little more traction than it needs. It'll work itself out one way or another. I trust the process. I trust Brandon Beane. I think right now, probably the two sides are further apart than we think. I think Beane's got a particular value, and I think Drew and Jordan have an idea of what their value is going into the future. And that's a hard thing to parse. And so I think they're going to sit down. I think both sides do respect each other. We've seen nothing but respect in the media from the coaches and Brandon Beane and talking about Poyer. And we haven't seen anything from Poyer's side of coming out, getting sloppy on his side either. So I expect that to continue. And with Beane, you never know. We could wake up tomorrow and an extension could be done and this episode is totally irrelevant and what the things we're talking about. But I don't know that deal gets done anytime soon. Either way, Jordan Poyer is not a worry to me for 2022.
Right. Yeah. And the nice thing is when it comes down to it, we've seen that there's a lot more smoke in the media than what actually comes out of One Bills Drive. They're pretty, in lockstep there. So I feel like, especially with Jordan Poyer, he knows what that value base is for him. And I don't think he doesn't want to go over it, especially when you got guys like Oliver and Knox and Tremaine Edmonds coming down the pipeline. He's got to keep it within certain parameters.
It's his last chance to make money. So
absolutely,
that's the other side of this. As we're Bills fans, and I'm never going to hide my fact that I'm a fan. I want Jordan Poyer here. I'd like him to get extended. I don't know that I love 5 year. Like I think he thinks he has 5 years left. I don't know if that's true or not. Time is definitely undefeated. So I don't know if that's the case, but if he wants to make the type of money that's generational wealth, this is the last time to cash in. And I don't know, that's going to be where it really comes down to is being willing to pay him maybe over market value for the previous things that he's done versus where Beane believes his market value is now. Because if this is his last chance to get money, I won't blame Jordan Poyer if he seeks greener pastures with a worse team to get that big check the one last time.
Right. And quite frankly, since he's been in the league, he really hasn't had that opportunity yet. He's taken pretty decent hometown discounts. Even when he initially signed and then that second contract, he didn't break the bank on that either. Secondly, we got 2 more lawsuits that have been filed on Deshaun Watson. That makes it 26 to date. Guys, are the NFL's hands tied? Personally, I believe, I don't know how you can suspend him less than a year. What are your thoughts?
It's a gray area. You know, the NFL is supposedly the investigation on their end ended about a week and a half ago. But as more of these come to light, I can't imagine they're just going to say, "Hey, we're done. We're not going to look into these newest allegations." At some point, you might have to put him on an exempt list. You might have to start there and kind of work your way to that policy because it's. You know, I don't want to get too much into it in terms of the allegations versus we don't know what actually happened. There's, you know, two sides, especially three sides. There's what Watson says, there's what they say, and there might just be kind of like somewhere in between. In some cases, the truth as well. So both sides might be getting played here, but it's just one of those things that I think the NFL has to wait and see as more and more of these come out. They can't necessarily come out and say, well, 8-game suspension, 1 year suspension, because if it gets worse for Watson and there is true evidence against him, 1 year might look really light in terms of that punishment. So that's why I think that exempt list might come into play sooner rather than later.
Yeah, again, I echo that same thing. I think the quicker they make some type of decisive move to that, like get him on the exempt list, I think is the better, because these allegations, from everything I've read, are going to continue to come in. Like, I don't think we're slowing down at any rate. And so the longer they kick this down the road, I think it looks bad for the NFL. I don't know, you know, if you're a Browns fan and a woman, I feel like that's a really tough sell right now for that market. I think, you know, I talked to my wife, she's not a huge football fan, but I think there's just a thing in general of women kind of sitting around waiting to see what the NFL's response is going to be to this. And that's a pretty big section of this fan base. So I think they have to do something and take at least the smoke, right? Like, we don't know the extent of the claims. I'm not going to get into it. I don't know the case well enough, but where there's smoke, there's fire. And I think the NFL has to take this very seriously. They've kind of fumbled when it comes to how they view women and the things that happen to women, whether it's domestic violence in the past. They've sort of fumbled those cases, and this one they really can. So even if that's sort of setting a precedent, you have to do something, I think, and get them on the exempt list. He's not starting the year with the Cleveland Browns. I think every day that you see a picture of him at practice with the Cleveland Browns is kind of a slap in the face to a lot of fans who are sitting here waiting for something to happen.
Yeah, it's definitely got to be difficult. I mean, the optics on this are just horrific. Yeah. And I mean, for, like you said, for a league that thus far, whether it was the Ray Rice situation or the Kareem Hunt situation, I mean, we could go endless. I mean, it just keeps happening. Yeah. And it seems like the NFL just doesn't, you know, they kind of fumble their way through. But then a guy like Josh Gordon, who smokes weed, gets a year's suspension. So I feel like, you know, when you got something like Calvin Ridley, who gets suspended for betting, if you don't do anything, if you don't do more than a year, you're saying that, you know, betting on sports has a bigger connotation or a, you know, is
consequence.
Yeah, bigger consequence than what, you know, Deshaun Watson has done.
I think another aspect to this too is not just Deshaun Watson, but the information that we found out about the Houston Texans and that New York Times piece. And where that investigation of the NFL, if that information was there for them, where's that trickle effect, and how are they responsible for this? Because if those allegations are also true, then I think the Texans also need to have some repercussions sent their way.
Yeah, and we've definitely seen that both Haslam and then McNair, the two owners, have had some pretty black eyes in terms of how they've handled things, questionable stuff that has happened in their past. So I think this, you know, where there's smoke, there could be fire. And I feel like this could definitely potentially go out of control. So
yeah, NFL cares about its public perception, and you know, like you said, that the more allegations there are, the harder it becomes for them to ignore. And like I said, the exempt list, I think, would probably be the best way to start it out before you can finally get some kind of true set suspension in place.
Could they, is that exempt list, Ryan, could they suspend him indefinitely? I know that there's been indefinite suspensions.
Yeah, pretty much. To my understanding, yes. And then, you know, you can get them off that list if something changes, but then you could also come down with a more concrete suspension as well.
Yep, got it.
Which I believe it's the NFLPA that's handling any suspensions at this point, and then the commissioner can potentially, an appeal, and then he makes his decision off that.
They did change it around recently where it's, I don't know if it's like an independent person that does it first, and then when he can come in on the appeal. But he was talking about that during some interview somewhat recently, and he said the same thing. Yeah, he's kind of out of it until that appeal process.
Gotcha. Okay. And then the final thing, the Bills announced today that there is a new Caesars Sportsbook suite at Highmark Stadium that'll hold about 300 to 400 people. What do you think about the trends of sports betting and this becoming a big potential thing in the Bills' new stadium?
I'll step on that one. One, I kind of wish they would have gone with there's a local sports book at Seneca. I wish that would have been more of a fit for me, but I get it. You're going to get bigger market from the bigger guys, and especially with how good the Bills are and that the Bills are going to be on a number of national TV games. You're going to start to see bigger companies want to get their names and brands in and associated around the Buffalo Bills. So I understand that. That's just sort of a personal thing I would have liked to have seen as a fan there. But in terms of sports betting, I don't put money on sports. I love sports too much. I've seen too many good friends just get their heart broken on sports. But people absolutely love it. And I do think it's good for the game in the same way fantasy has been good for the game, in that it gets eyes that maybe otherwise won't pay attention in the way that nerds like us pay attention every single week, where you have something invested into the game. Even if it's, I think most people that are getting on these sports betting apps, the average person isn't putting substantial amounts of money. It's just enough money to, have a good time and get into the game, similar to what a fantasy football provides. So I think it creates access to a game to fans that don't take it in a serious way like we do. And I think that's a good thing ultimately for football. It's going to lead to bigger TV deals, bigger money. That's going to allow Brandon Beane to do more. The more football grows, the better it is for everyone.
Yeah, that's well said. And, the sports betting, that's the way of the world right now. The NFL is embracing it. It's already the biggest game in the U.S., obviously, but this is only going to help them get more eyes on the game, get more people interested, to Aaron's point, just like fantasy football does.
Yeah, I think it's going to be interesting, and it'll be definitely something to keep an eye on in terms of the new stadium. How many, new potential things we're going to see, new features with the new stadium that you might have seen in Dallas, you might have seen in Atlanta or Vegas. So the Bills are trending to do new things with this new stadium. So now let's break down those personnel packages. Before I get too deep into this, the one thing I did want to mention, for anybody who isn't familiar, with the actual personnel packages, when you're looking at 11 personnel or 12 personnel or 13 or even 0, those numbers are actually specific. That first number in 11 personnel actually indicates the number of running backs on the field, and the second is the number of tight ends. Then what you do is you take those two and you subtract them from 5, and that's the number of eligible receivers that you have downfield. So if you have 1, or if you have 11, it's 1 running back, 1 tight end, and then 3 receivers. 12 would be 1 running back, 2 tight ends, 2 receivers. So that's how you actually break it down. So if it's a little confusing, and then Ian, if you don't mind, can you throw up the 11 and then the 12 for the actual personnel packages? So as you see right there, a little faster. If you don't mind going back to the 11 right now, as you can see, you've got, Josh under center. You got, might be Devin, it might be James Cook, or even Zach Moss. I'd be surprised. And then you got your 3 wide receivers and your tight end. And then with 12 personnel, you got basically the same thing. The only difference is you're going to have potentially Dawson Knox and OJ Howard or Tommy Sweeney on the field. So, gentlemen, what I want to get into tonight is the Bills last season ran 11 personnel 71% of the time. That was second only, and I was surprised when I saw this, second only to Washington, who ran 11 personnel 75% of the time. In the new age of run and gun and kind of a air raid offense, what do you expect from this Bills offense going forward? Do you see it leaning more towards 12 personnel, a little bit more, 11 personnel, or could we see a multifaceted kind of breakdown of how things are going to be run?
Well, that's a loaded question until we see a little bit of film from Ken Dorsey. Obviously, like you said, though, he's going to lean heavily on what the Bills have already done. A lot of that under Brian Daboll. So I think you're still going to see a lot of 11 personnel, but that doesn't mean he's not going to tinker with this offense a little bit. Where 12 comes in, they sign an OJ Howard, someone who showed a lot of promise early on in his career with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. The one thing I like about the Bills offense is they have no shortage of weapons anywhere. 11 personnel, you're probably thinking, let's just say Singletary, because he's earned that starting job as your running back. Yeah, absolutely. Very strong at the end of the season. So you have him in the backfield. And then traditionally, you're going to have Stephon Diggs, Gabriel Davis, and then Jamison Crowder as your three receivers, Dawson Knox as your tight end. But what I really like is I think the Bills could disguise things. For example, I think that they could make it look like they're running a completely different personnel. I know we weren't talking about it, but a 21 personnel. You might start out by having Devin Singletary and James Cook in the backfield, and then take Cook and line him up as one of those wide receivers because he's someone that is just natural catching the ball. You can make it look like it's one personnel into the other. You can use OJ Howard as a big slot receiver. So you can make it look like you're running 12, or it might actually be closer to an 11 personnel just because of the route that he's going to be running, what he's going to be doing. So I think that all these weapons that they have, it's going to benefit them in the long run because it's going to keep a lot of defenses on their heels.
Yeah, and to sort of piggyback off of what you're saying, when you told me that the topic for tonight was this, and we have a Cover One Slack channel, and this is a constant topic this off season. Once they got OJ Howard, there's whole idea that they were going to switch to more of the 12 personnel. I understand it. To me, what I'm seeing the Bills do this offseason with the addition of Howard, with the addition of Cook, is more positionless football, which gives them sort of exactly the flexibility that Ryan's talking about, where like, yes, you have these traditional concepts of personnel groupings, and you can probably dictate, at least especially early in the season, to the defense some things when you run out certain personnel packages and they want to try to, okay, they're going with Howard, we're going to try to match that with a linebacker or get big in case you are running the football. But really, adding in Howard is technically a tight end, but this is a guy. We heard that the Bills were in on Ingram this offseason for a bigger slot type wide receiver that they could put out. While Howard didn't do that in Tampa Bay, I think he has the athletic skill set and the frame to be able to do that, to line out wide and motion out and be more of a wide receiver. So I think this idea is more, to me, positionless, being able to maybe match up better and not have to, we don't want the Bills to lose their fastball. They're very good in 11 personnel. We don't want to take that away from them. I had a little bit different stats than you. I did have them at 71%. It was top 5. They were the 5th best, ran at the 5th most according to Sharp Football Stats. But they had a 52% success rate. They were actually really good running the ball out of 11 personnel last year too. So I don't want to take away that fastball. I know, the conversation this offseason has been, we want more of these other looks, and that's good for when a team's playing cover 2 and Josh just can't bust it open. And you want to show some different looks that, hey, we're going to run the ball. We're going to get physical with you, but then psych, we're not, we're going to bring OJ Howard out. You want to still maintain that fastball, but have something in your pocket where you can show a different look when stuff's not looking, or a team has you figured out. And I think the Bills have created a roster, and with some of these positionless ideas of players, that really gives them the flexibility to counter punch now, where last year it was just fastball and we're going to hammer you and it's going to work most times, but we're going to run into a game like Jacksonville where we just can't get the ball going and we can't get out of what we're supposed to be doing. Now this gives you some new things where, hey, we're in a little bit of a rut. Let's go maybe 15-20% running 12 personnel and try to get physical with the team and outsize them. And I think that's what these new additions have done.
Absolutely. I'm going to take a quick second to do a live read. A Dentist for Kids offers individual dental treatment for kids of all ages. By providing a relaxed, fun, and encouraging environment, Dr. Zach's goal is to help your child build confidence in their smile and with their overall dental health. A Dentist for Kids is currently accepting new patients, and they participate with most major insurances. If you visit Dr. Zach, mention Buffalo Late Night for $25 off your choice of custom whitening kit or an electric toothbrush. Call today to set up an appointment with Dr. Zach and his team, 585-538-7230. Now, alongside of what you guys were saying, I think the interesting part, which I know the Bills kind of want to do, is more of a up-tempo, kind of that K-gun style offense, kind of keep, defenses on their heels and not be able to rotate, for their own packages. And I wouldn't be surprised if you did see something like a 10 personnel, but you have somebody like James Cook where you could almost go, 0 personnel where you're going all wideouts. I know they didn't do it a lot, but you'd be able to kind of mimic that 10 or 11 personnel with James Cook out there without having that tight end, and being able to, kind of keep things moving without having to flip guys out, because you could move James Cook, behind center, out wide in the slot. I mean, you guys know he's pretty much played all over and can run the route tree.
Yeah.
I think I don't think James Cook is going to get a ton of run year one. I think if he does, it's going to come, I think, a little bit later in the year. I think Devin Singletary is still going to get the bulk of the production at the running back position. I think you'll see more situationally Cook come in third downs where they need a third down pass catching guy. Think of like James White in those Patriot offenses for years. That's really the piece that's been missing to this Buffalo offense, in my opinion, is that third down catching back. Maybe you bring him out on some other plays, but I think it's a very limited role to start for him. And here's another thing when we're talking about, these packages, the league is still pretty much 11 and 12 personnel, right? Like it's, right. I think league average rate now is, this last year was 61% was 11 personnel, 21%, 12 personnel. And then you had the rest of the packages in there. So that's 80% of plays run in the NFL are within these packages. And the Bills being at 71% in 11 and 8% in 12, I can see some of that shifting, but I think primarily they are still going to be who they are. And I think the best lineup, it was exactly what Ryan said earlier, is Diggs, Crowder, Davis with either Singletary or Cook, and you have Dawson Knox. And OJ Howard, I think, can come in and spell some of that, and maybe he is that big slot, but I don't see them getting out of that 11 personnel too much more. Maybe it dips down closer to 65%, 63%, something like that. But I don't think we're going to see a big push off of it.
Yeah, and Aaron's point on James Cook, Buffalo under Sean McDermott, Brandon Beane, rookies don't usually get a lot of early run unless it's a specific need. You look at Trey White in 2017, they needed a cornerback. You look at Tremaine Edmonds, and those are defensive guys. Even Josh Allen, it was not the plan to get him into the lineup as a rookie. It was to ease him along. And I think, as Aaron said, as the season goes on, you'll see more and more of Cook. He'll become more of a factor, but you probably do want to start slow with him. And what's funny is we're talking about, all these weapons. We still haven't mentioned Isaiah McKenzie, Khalil Shakir, again, a rookie who will probably be brought along slowly, but they have no shortage of depth now at receiver and at tight end and running back. So that's just another factor, is they're just kind of stockpiling that talent because injuries happen in this game, and you want to give those different looks when things aren't going well. So the Bills are going to have so many tools in that toolbox that it's going to be hard for defenses to match up, not just game by game, but quarter by quarter, because if they do start out slow, they're going to try to change things up to exploit whatever the defense is showing them on film.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be intriguing to see how they actually run things, but I absolutely agree. Going 11 personnel has worked for Josh, and I think the one common theme with this offense is that if it's not broken, don't fix it. And I know that they definitely try to make Josh as comfortable as possible. And the one thing that has been said is that Josh has a ton of say in this offense. And if it's something that he doesn't like, it's pretty much stricken from the offense right out of the gate. So it'll definitely be intriguing to see. What do you guys see potentially as OJ Howard's role going forward? I know he wasn't brought in as I think a $3 million 1-year contract. So it's nothing to break the bank. And it doesn't, I wouldn't say it's not like Von Miller where he's playing a ton. What do you expect to see out of him?
Well, so I think this one's an interesting one too in the sort of 12 personnel conversation, because in my view of why you get into 12 personnel, it is to play a more physical style of football and to be able to run a little bit better. And I don't think that OJ Howard brings you that as tight end too. Like in his career so far, he's not been a good run blocker according to PFF, which I have issues with PFF grades, but since I'm not breaking down tape of him, I'm not going to go into, each and every issue with him. But I think you can find a common theme. If a guy's never really graded out well as a run blocker, I think you can probably say that he probably hasn't had a lot of success in doing it. And over his career, he's had one season over 60 grade. He's been 44.4, 62.8, 50, a 60, a 54.7. So I don't know that you're bringing him in that 12 personnel package to come in and run block and add that dynamic. I think you're bringing him in where Dawson Knox is a pretty good run blocker, and maybe you run a play action and, OJ Howard is the guy that leaks out instead of a Gabriel Davis or something like that. But I think you're still sort of creating, it's a read when you bring out OJ Howard in that 12 personnel, I don't think any teams are saying, oh, well, they're really just going to pound the ball down our throats because they're bringing out a bigger package. I think that teams still are going to assume, okay, well, they're bringing in that tight end, but it's still to pass the ball first, which I'm okay with. I just don't know that. I think there's a disconnect between fans seeing, hey, we have 2 tight ends, we're going to be able to run the ball with more success. I don't know that that's the case, and they did run the ball pretty well out of 11. So, and another weird thing about that whole conversation to me is, it wasn't that long ago, prior to Josh Allen getting here, that people were saying, no, we need a modern NFL offense. We need to be running 11 personnel, 10. We need to go modern, spread this ball out. Bills have done that for a few years, and it got a little bit tricky only against like those cover 2 soft shell defenses where they would bait Josh into changing a play to run and something wouldn't work, or Josh couldn't push the ball downfield. And then I think fans started to get a little bit worried about that, even though the Bills still were putting up astronomical offensive numbers, still one of the best offenses in football most of the time. People now want to dial back. So it's funny how fan bases and it's all cyclical, right? Like we want more modern offense. Okay, maybe that's a little too modern. Let's pull it back and run some 12, right?
Yeah, no, I think that's well said. And, a lot of people do forget, though, Howard was very effective his first 2 seasons in this league in terms of scoring touchdowns, 11 touchdowns as a receiver at Tampa Bay. I don't want to say he was phased out, but he essentially was phased out once Tom Brady came along to get Rob Gronkowski, who they already had that instant chemistry. So I am interested to see how the Bills are going to utilize him, knowing that he can be a touchdown threat. Maybe it's in the red zone. And as Aaron alluded, maybe he's the one that leaks out on plays. And when it comes to running the ball better, I agree. It's not going to be because of Howard. It's going to be because of guys like Aaron Cromer coaching up that line. It's going to be Roger Saffold being there.
And coaching up. Maybe he can coach up Howard.
Maybe he can. Maybe there is something that he can do there, and he can even get and I think Knox has done a fine job, but you can even make, you can always get better as a blocker too. And Knox can take that next step as well. So it's going to be interesting to see, but the Bills at least do have a threat now at tight end too, as a pass catching weapon. So if something were to happen to Knox, if he's out for a game, or if he, gets dinged up, you can spell him at times in a game as well. Kind of just like they like to keep their D-line fresh. Maybe that's going to be something where you can keep Knox a little bit fresher too, and throw Howard out there in the formations for 10, 12, maybe plays a game as well.
Then the perfect scenario is he gets enough reps to put up production, gets a deal somewhere else, and the Bills start playing comp pick bingo with incoming and outgoing free agents. So that's where the best case scenario is, that he's productive enough to get himself that new deal and go get your money, and the Bills get in comp pick bingo a little bit. But to your point, Ryan, I think the reason he's here is that drop off. If something happens to Knox over the last couple of seasons, he's missed some time. If something happens to him, even if it's a week or two, you're not dropping off to Tommy Sweeney. You're dropping off to a similar athletic profile guy that can still stress the seam of a defense, still give you that, hey, a defense has to account for this guy every time he's on the field. When Dawson Knox went down, you basically eliminated the tight end position, and there was no need to account for that. And I think, Brandon Beane clearly saw that. I saw that. Everyone saw that. And so that was a huge thing for them to address. And I think really that's it, is, hey, if this guy gets hurt, we need the drop off to not be so significant.
And you definitely saw that Josh, at least over the course of his time here, has become more reliant on Dawson. Dawson's the guy that he always goes to. I mean, you saw in the Patriots game in the playoffs, that first touchdown. I mean, Josh waited forever, and he was able to get it to Dawson in the back of the end zone. I mean, he has such a rapport with him, and I think that's a big thing. I mean, Josh has proven, if you have a rapport with him, you're going to see the ball. You're going to see receptions. And that, I think that was something that James Cook said himself. He's like, I might not get it initially, but if I can build a rapport with Josh, I will get it eventually. So it is going to be nice. The one thing I'm interested in is, potentially if this can help keep Dawson Knox contract number down. If you can kind of buffer some of those statistics that Dawson might have this year and put OJ Howard out there, maybe we can keep that, from getting into the top 5, top 3 tight end numbers that Dawson Knox potentially could get after this season.
It's possible, but then you get contracts like David Njoku gets, and I get that the Browns did that based on the skill set. The fact that they thought that at that time, I think they were thinking that Watson was going to definitely be playing at some point this year, right, and that they would be able to utilize Njoku better than Baker Mayfield did and any other quarterbacks that would be on that roster. But it always muddies the waters when you get someone that hasn't had the production and they're getting this big payday. You see a guy like Dawson Knox coming off of a 9-touchdown season, who's getting better every year, who's been better in his short term than Njoku's been over his career overall in terms of production. So I'm sure his agent is keeping close tabs on that and the other deals that maybe take place over the course of the season.
One thing I will say to that, I agree with what you're saying. Bean sort of alluded to this with the Jacksonville Jaguars deals that they were handing out in this offseason, basically saying like, hey, if an agent wants to use that as the threshold because some other team overpaid, like that isn't the real market. Like, and I'll tell people that. So Njoku to me is one of those more outliers of like, okay, yes, we understand that deal was you can bring that to us, but that isn't how the market actually works. Like the Browns made a terrible decision. We're not in the business of making those types of terrible decisions. For me, I'm ready to open up a Brinks truck for Dawson Knox. I think that he is on the path to being one of the better tight ends in the league. I don't want to limit his production. I want to increase his production. I'd love to see him be, again, that third target that's getting the target percentages, but more. I want to see him getting closer to 100 targets this year because I think the amount of production that he can put up is really incredible for what he can do for Josh. That touchdown production that he's been able to have, I think that he can continue on that type of pace. And if the Bills are going to make the 2022 Super Bowl run that I think they're going to make, they need him to be producing in that top 8 tight end range, in my opinion. And so I don't want to see OJ Howard come in and take too much of the production. I understand what you're saying. But I don't know that how much production OJ Howard would have to gain to limit what Dawson Knox is going to make in the future. I think his agent has established what he means to this team, what he means to Josh Allen. And I think he'll get the type of money he's looking for here in Buffalo. I think they see the importance of it. And so with that said, go off, Dawson. Like, I don't know how much more it could go up, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, that begs the question, who would you keep between Ed Oliver and Dawson Knox? Because I know it potentially could get to the point where maybe they keep Tremaine and then you're stuck keeping, one of Oliver or Dawson Knox.
You know what, though? The only thing I hate about these games is we played this game for an entire offseason with Matt Milano and Daryl Williams, and it was who will you keep because you can't keep both, and then Brandon Beane kept both. My friend Greg always likes to quote Arrested Development, and that there's always money in the banana stand, and I don't know that's an either or. If I had to say either or, if it's like similar money, I'm going at Oliver all day. The fact that like interior pressure matters at such a high rate. And I think that he plays in it the second half of the season. I've been saying, I think Ed Oliver was playing at an all-pro level the second half of the season last year. And I think that he can get real close to those guys that are at all-pro defensive tackles. And that value to me is higher than any tight end. And so you'd probably have to take a hit if you don't get Dawson Knox back and you'd be looking for another tight end, but I would rather keep an elite player in a more premium position at defensive tackle and personally than I would an elite player at tight end.
Yeah, and to Aaron's point, you can structure contracts a certain way. The TV money is coming in. You're going to be seeing the cap continue to go up. So you can have a low cap hit in 2023 or 2024 and then really start paying them on the back end. There's a lot of things you can do. I think that they're both in the future plans, maybe even more. I think they're in the plans more so than Edmonds. And I'm not saying that the door is shut on Edmonds either,
right?
But I think it's a lot, I don't want to say easier to replace a linebacker than it is a premier defensive tackle or a tight end, but in a way it is. I know that Edmonds is that athletic freak. He has the wingspan. He does a lot of things very well. I think he gets a lot of people in the fan base.
He gets the Levi Wallace.
Yeah, he does. Yeah. And I get it because you see the one play where he over pursues and then that does go for a big play, but you're missing the other 15 things he did really well in that game, or 10 things they did really well. So it's tough, but so eventually tough decisions do have to come. Guys do have to go. It's why they didn't throw a lot of money at Levi Wallace. They knew what his ceiling was. They said, hey, it'd be nice if we could have you around, but we're not going to break the bank for you. And it's going to be the same thing, in my opinion, possibly with Poyer. Because the age factor, the fact that, listen, you've been great. You are an all-pro. If you want to break the bank elsewhere with a team that has a lot of cap space, by all means,
enjoy Jacksonville. Yeah.
Enjoy Jacksonville.
Right.
But we have a few guys that have been in the system for a few years. You can draft a safety. You know, generally you can get a really good safety in the draft in rounds 2 and rounds 3. Teams aren't going out of their way to get a safety in round 1. I mean, you saw it this year. One of the best prospects in this draft was a safety, Kyle Hamilton, and he just fell into the middle part of the first round. So they can always replace a player like Poyer. And I'm not saying that is a year 1, some rookie's going to come in and play at that level,
right?
But you can develop them and bring them along and feel confident that they can do the job.
Yeah, we don't really know what they think about Damar Hamlin so far, or Jaquan Johnson, or Josh Thomas. So it'd be intriguing to see, you know, if they feel like Damar Hamlin can step right in. I mean, it's hard to say. You know, you got an All-Pro in Jordan Poyer. He is truly one in one, and we haven't seen that type of play in a long time in Buffalo. I wouldn't say maybe since like Jarris Bird in terms of that high quality.
I mean, Micah Hyde.
Right. But it'd be definitely, it's interesting to see how Brandon Beane's going to do it. But I think, you know, every time we think we know what Brandon Beane's going to do, we don't. And he does the exact opposite. And I mean, for all we know, you know, with the salary cap going up and the way that the Rams, I mean, Les Snead has proven the salary cap can be absolutely manipulated. You know, they can.
Brandon Beane did it this year with Von Miller, right? Like nobody thought that the Bills were legitimately in on those ties. We heard the rumblings of a Chandler Jones, and we saw that contract number, and it was like, well, whew, right? And then Bills swoop in and get Von Miller, and then to Ryan's point, it's the way these things are structured. The money coming in gives these GMs a little bit more confidence to make these big deals. And no, you're not going to pay out the entirety of the deal. I was just joking around with Greg Thompson offline. We were talking about, hey, if Jordan Poyer, my big thing is if Poyer moves on, I'm loading a Brinks truck up and I'm giving it to Micah Fitzpatrick if he doesn't extend, because he's only going to be 26 years old next year. I would love to get him in, give him elite safety, done deal. And I was like, now Greg, go make me a contract that looks really big but isn't actually big, and then we'll present that to everyone, right? And that's what Brandon Beane is essentially doing with these deals.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And you're seeing these deals getting more and more creative, even just little elevator triggered, you know, bonuses that they're getting. They're doing everything.
Stuff, yeah.
Right. Absolutely. You're seeing these things happen where they can get guys in and, you know, have a bunch of avoidable years where, you know, like Von Miller. I mean, we might only see him for 2. He seems to think he might play for 6. God bless him if he can. And
all athletes think they're going to play longer than they are. That's a tale as old as time. Yeah.
I mean, Tom Brady is, I mean, granted, a quarterback and defensive end are very different things. But I mean, if you look at, I mean, Bruce Smith, what did he play for 17 years?
Sure.
You never know. And Bruce Smith played at a time where they did not have the technological advances in medical, you know, that they do
he
now.
was not doing yoga like Tom Brady.
That'd be interesting to watch. So Travis Matthews, innovative fabrics keep you looking and feeling your best. Whether you are on the golf course or strolling through town, offering supreme comfort for every aspect of your life. With clothing that's quick drying, wrinkle resistant, and super soft, you can move seamlessly from work to play. Get 20% off your first order at travismatthew.com. You can find the link right on Buffalo Late Night social media pages. So I'm gonna kind of sidetrack a little bit from that 11 and 12 personnel. I truly enjoyed that. I want to ask you guys, Tyreek Hill has been giving a ton of praise towards Tua. What kind of additional pressure do you think this is putting on Tua to perform? And do you think, or what are your thoughts on the Dolphins this year with their additions of, you know, Tua, or I mean, with Tyreek Hill and the other weapons that they've added in?
Well, when you're going out saying that he's more accurate than Patrick Mahomes, you are putting a little additional pressure on him, probably from the fan base and the expectations. I think they have a roster that can contend for a wild card spot in the AFC. There's no doubt in my mind on that. Just because of the way they've built up that roster on both sides of the ball, I think that you can get the ball to Tyreek Hill on short patterns. We've seen him go the distance against the Bills and many other teams for that matter. So Tua doesn't have to necessarily be stretching the field, but at the same point, who are we fooling here? The Dolphins, in my opinion, do not believe in Tua whatsoever. It's why before he was ended up traded to the Cleveland Browns, they were pursuing Deshaun Watson so heavily. The
Even knowing
ownership
what
was.
they knew, yeah.
Right, even knowing what they knew and why they had a ownership stake ready for Tom Brady, and where he would be able to step out of retirement and be a player / owner. And I get it. In the case of a Tom Brady, that's a Hall of Fame guy. Watson, when he was playing, was a top 10 quarterback. And anytime you get a player like that, the player themselves, not all the baggage that's coming with a guy like Watson, I understand it, but it doesn't show much faith in who they drafted high in the first round not so long ago. And again, different regime, but still, I'm not sure it speaks much in terms of their confidence in Tua.
Yeah, I have been saying this for a couple of years now. I think the Dolphins are the drought era Bills. Like, I think this is the drought era Dolphins for them.
Yep.
I don't believe in their front office. I don't believe that their coaching and front office are necessarily on the same page. I do like their off-season moves. I think if Tua's going to succeed as a quarterback in the NFL, he's not a guy that wins you games, but he's a guy that you can win games with. I think he's a bottom, sort of like a Tyrod Taylor, one of these guys where he can be good enough and not make mistakes and get you the ball down the field and keep you in a game. But he's not going to take over a game at any point. Until you have that quarterback that can take over a game and get you to the next level, you're kind of just a middling drought era Bills team where you're maybe a wild card team if a couple breaks go your way and you can steal a game from the Bills or something like that. Like, you have a little bit of hope, but you're never really going to be in that next top tier. And I don't know that Tua's got what it takes to be in that next top tier. He doesn't have any of the freak athletic traits that if you're not going to be a super strong arm quarterback and all that stuff, like I don't know that the NFL is built for a guy that's just going to take 3 steps and hit a slant over and over again. It's just, there's too small margins of error to rely on long sustained drives. And so I think that's why they brought in a Tyreek Hill and why they went with speed, where they know they're not going to push the ball deep downfield. So you need a guy. Sort of the opposite problem the Bills have is the Bills are trying to find yards after catch. They need yards after catch because they're not going to break explosive plays with Tua putting 20, 30 yard intended air yard passes out there. It's just not a recipe for them to succeed. So I think too much is stacked against them with the limits that they have at quarterback to be a true contender. And I think they're going to middle for a little while until they make a decision on Tua. And that, if we know as Bills fans, those quarterback decisions, man, if you wait on a guy a year too long and don't draft a guy a year too long, like this really starts to compile. And now you have a coach in McDaniels who doesn't have his quarterback. So he's going to want to draft his quarterback. And then maybe he gets a year or two. And if it fails, then the coach is out and then you still have the quarterback and you want to see if you're going to use that 5th year option. And you just continue this cycle of firing a coach, moving on from a quarterback, firing the GM, getting a new coach, and it doesn't ever line up. And then the Dolphins miss the playoffs for 20 years. And that is what's going to happen. And I'm going to love every minute of it.
So they're pretty much in the hunt graphic.
Exactly.
It's
a terrible place to be. I wouldn't wish it on anyone but everyone in the AFC East.
Yep, 100%. I think
the Patriots are heading there too, just so you know.
God willing, because I can't stand Mac Jones. It's funny. I was kind of wondering what's going to happen with this team this year, whether or not Tua and Mike McDaniel are just placeholders, for Sean Payton and Tom Brady, because that, was a big question mark as to, potentially this being the last year in Tampa Bay. Is Tom Brady going to move over? What's going to happen? This coming draft, which they do it every year, but this coming draft is supposed to be loaded with quarterback talent between CJ Stroud and Spencer Rattler. There's a ton of talent that's coming out. I
hope the Dolphins go Spencer Rattler.
Me too. I feel like you're getting the same thing if it's like Tua 2.0.
Yeah, exactly. One thing I will say is, a lot of people are talking about the Dolphins, and the Jets had a sneaky, really good offseason, and that doesn't worry me because I think Zach Wilson, if he's going to be a thing, it's going to take another year here. But if anyone has the potential in the AFC East to challenge the Bills in the next 2 to 3 years, I think the Jets have a legitimate chance and that they built a good roster. I like Saleh. I think he's got a lot of that Sean McDermott, hey, let's get in here and change the culture. I think they drafted well. And they've given good weapons. And Zach Wilson, if you're going to have a quarterback that's going to be elite in the modern NFL, he's got to have the things that Zach Wilson does. I'm not saying Wilson will become elite, but he's got those similar Josh Allen traits. He can put the ball down the field. He can move with his legs. He can get out of the structure of a play and make some plays. It's can he get some offensive line help? Can he get weapons that are consistently on the field? Can he wrap his head around the NFL game? If he does those things, that's, in my opinion, the team that is most likely going to maybe push this Bills team and can maybe get on this level. But I don't see it in Miami or in New England because the quarterbacks are just too limited.
Yeah,
no, that's fair.
Yeah, the deficiencies there between the two of them are a little bit too much. And quite frankly, I think the Jets have the chance to have a pretty solid defense. I mean, you have the return of Carl Lawson this year. I mean, they got Jermaine Johnson felt like a rock, and I still to this day cannot figure out why. But I think that they have a chance with their defense. They got a
mini Stephon Diggs and Wilson too.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot going on there. There's a ton of talent on that team, and I mean, there's
I've seen find a way to blow it, but
yeah, I've seen some pretty bold takes saying that they're going to go 5-1 in the division, which I don't think is going to happen. But I'd be stunned if they somehow manage that. But granted, the Dolphins and the Patriots, I think so. Here's my thought. This is a hot take. I think this could potentially be the nail in the coffin season for Bill Belichick. I think that team is in a world of hurt. I think it's deficient of talent. The fact that they're relying on Devontae Parker is scary, considering Devontae Parker has yet to have a full season without injury. And I don't believe in Mac Jones. I think Mac Jones, very similar to Tua, is a product of a schemed offense, getting him short to intermediate passes that inflate his stats and help his accuracy. I think both of them are just middling quarterbacks. You know, you've got Chad Pennington 2.0 with both of them.
Yeah, well, listen, with the Patriots, once Tom Brady walked out that door, you weren't getting those premier players coming in, maybe taking a little bit of a discount to play alongside Tom Brady, play for a ring. You saw Matthew Judon trying to recruit everyone this offseason to no avail. And then you throw in bad drafting into the mix too. And that, you know, that would be your saving grace. Okay, we struck out in free agency, but if you draft well, okay, great. But they're not drafting well. They're taking prospects, you know, probably 2-3 rounds ahead of time in some cases where they should be going. So you're right. It might be the end of Bill Belichick sooner rather than later. And now he wouldn't be fired. They would probably say behind closed doors, listen, you got to hang him up or say I'm stepping away or whatever the case may be.
New position.
A lot of risk. Yeah. Maybe give him a front office job, whatever the case may be, to, you know, because he did so much for that.
Yeah, give him the Brad Stevens deal that he got with the Celtics there. Yeah, I think at the very least, his drafting needs to get their drafting rights need to be revoked from him because he's not been able to draft well now for a long time. And so I think you at least have to remove that from him. But I don't know how you have that conversation with Bill Belichick without ending that relation. I don't think you pull power away from him at this point in his career. So I do think that if it goes sour enough that the relationship probably would end.
I got Dave with a little comment here. With any luck, the Pats will can Belichick and take a while to recover considering the pure lack of talent. I mean, I can't disagree. I think that kind of like what you were saying with the Bills, you know, when we went through that just putrid revolving door of quarterbacks, I think you could potentially see that with the Patriots. Same thing, you know, with the Dolphins. Just, you know, a sheer lack of we lost Ryan.
It looked like his screen froze up. So
yeah, a sheer lack of talent from both sides. Aaron, I'm gonna just kind of round this out real quick and wrap this up. Which of the three between the Dolphins, Jets, and Patriots, who do you think is, you know, the one that could, I wouldn't say knock on the door. I don't think any of them are going to challenge the Bills for the division, but who would be the one that you would be scared of the most
for 2022?
Yes.
Yeah. You know, it's a little tough. I do think still that, you know, the Patriots still do present some weird matchups, especially on the defensive side of the ball. It didn't look the way in the last two meetings, so I feel pretty confident there. I'd have to go with Miami. I think those Miami games, even though the Bills ended up winning, and it was really second half performances for them, those first halves of those games are a little bit tighter. And if Miami can close the window a little bit, I could see them getting into some more competitive games and maybe being able to if they're having a good game where Tyreek gets going and, Tua's really accurate and they're getting the ball out quick and he's getting protection, I could see a scenario where they're able to maybe keep pace and keep it a one possession game. And it's a little bit scarier than you'd like it to be, or, maybe they have the lead late in the game. But ultimately, I think the deficiencies of their quarterback versus Josh Allen being a top 3 quarterback in the NFL, I think that's where it matters. And ultimately, nobody scares me as long as Josh Allen's taking snaps in this division. And until these teams, I hate to say, until these teams really prove otherwise, it's something I've said about the Bills for years with KC, until the Bills prove that they can beat the Kansas City Chiefs, I'm going to keep ranking the Kansas City Chiefs as the number 1 team in the AFC, no matter what Vegas tells me, no matter what. And when we do a preview show before games, and people killed me last year going into that KC game during the regular season because I picked KC, even though the Bills won. I pick KC, and even in that playoff game, I say, hey, until they win in a game that matters, I'm picking KC until you prove otherwise. And so same thing goes for these other teams. Until they prove they can knock off Josh Allen and the Bills, none of them scare me.
Yeah, and I think that's what it comes down to is it's not even so much of what their defense bodes. I think it's you have to keep up with them now. I mean, you have to keep up with Buffalo. The amount of points that they put up, I mean, they're averaging over 30 points every single game. So that alone, you have to expect, can Tua put up 30? Can Mac Jones put up 30? Can Zach Wilson? The only one that I feel remotely comfortable that could do it, be just pure based on talent alone, is Zach Wilson. Just, I mean, what he is capable of doing, his ability to, kind of create outside of the pocket, stretch a play a little bit, move with his legs. He's got a cannon of an arm. He's proven that. I think it just comes down to very similar things happen to other quarterbacks where he gets gun shy. He sees ghosts. I think that's something that if he can clean that up, I'd be really scared of them because they have a ton with Breece Hall. You've got a ton of talent on that offense.
Garrett Wilson. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, you got Garrett Wilson. You still have a ton of talent from last year with Elijah Moore, and then oh my gosh, who's the one? Corey Davis. That's right. If he can stay healthy, that's a very, very nice threesome for wide receivers right there. And we don't know. Garrett Wilson potentially is number 1 right out of the gate.
Right. Yeah. No, I liked him a lot. We talked about him a lot as he looked a lot like I said earlier, like a mini Diggs. He really has that kind of look to his game and that, how well it's rounded. Denzel Mims was a guy Bills fans really liked a lot. He's there in their depth. Braxton Berrios was a guy a lot of people wanted. I don't think he's that good, but he gives them a solid slot option. And then they got George Fant. They got CJ Uzama from the Cincinnati Bengals. So they upgraded Tyler Conklin from Minnesota. Those were both guys on Greg and I's free agent wish list. So you're talking about, they've added the weapons. They're not as sexy names as Miami's added. I don't know if the offensive line is good enough to protect.
That's the biggest question. They added Laken Tomlinson.
Right.
They've got Elijah Vera Tucker.
I love Elijah Vera Tucker. Yeah.
Right. So it's questionable.
He's a good prospect.
If he can stay healthy, that's the biggest thing. I think there's a lot of talent. It just depends on if it all comes together. I don't know. And to Dave King's point right here, I'm interested. I think Juju Smith-Schuster is an intriguing prospect because I'll be honest with you, Juju in his first year with Ben was fantastic. Yeah. Was a very good slot receiver. So if you get Juju with a good quarterback, because that's the thing, every receiver in Pittsburgh was quite frankly handcuffed and hindered because of what Ben couldn't do.
Yeah.
So I think it'd be
worse
interesting
than playing with Tua, right?
Right, exactly. And at the end of the day, when you think about it, kind of like what Josh can do, what Aaron Rodgers can do, Tom Brady can do, they can elevate the talent around them. Patrick Mahomes is absolutely capable of being able to elevate anybody that plays with him. And you're going to see that this year. Until Andy Reid is no longer coaching that team, because Andy Reid is one of the greatest of all time, still is, and Pat Mahomes is still the quarterback, and they've still got Travis Kelce. I mean, just like you said, they're number 1 until they've been taken out.
Yep.
And I think the Bengals are still questionable. I think I don't know if they can, kind of repeat what they did last year, but I think the Bills at the end of the day have the most talent in the AFC in terms of full scale 1 to 53. I think they're right there. It just depends on whether or not they can actually get things going. All things said, I I want to thank you, Aaron. And of course, I want to thank Ryan Talbot. I got a message from Ryan. His power went out. That's why he was on.
That's the worst.
Dropped out on us real quick. But fantastic conversation. I know we jumped all over the place. The tough thing right now with us kind of being in that little lull, that 6-week lull until training camp starts, information is kind of few and far between. But again, I appreciate you guys. I appreciate you guys hopping on tonight. Again, this has been Buffalo Late Night. I do appreciate everybody who's been watching. You can find us on Twitter at BFLO Late Night. Aaron, if you want to plug yourself and what you do.
Yeah. So Aaron Quinn 716 on Twitter. You can follow me there. Always trying to have fun with Bills Mafia. And every Wednesday night, you can find myself and Greg Thompson over on the Cover One Buffalo podcast. We're there every single Wednesday night. And then we're there for you post game during the season at the post game show, always going live right after the game. We've got a really great lineup over at Cover One. Every night of the week, we got you covered with the podcast. Just a really great team we've built over there, and really excited for some of the stuff coming up this season. So make sure you're following, type Cover One into any of the social medias you're on, TikTok, Instagram, wherever you're at. We're posting everywhere. So follow the whole Cover One main page, and then you'll see all the shows, and make sure you're subscribed to everybody, because they're all putting in hard work. Like you said, this time of year is quite tough for content creators to come up with stuff during OTAs and stuff. So these guys are putting in hard work to keep content coming for Bills fans. So make sure you're following and liking, because all that stuff really matters a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. The Cover One does a great job. And, for Ryan Talbot, what they're doing over at the Shout Buffalo podcast, him and Matt Perino, great stuff. Yeah, really, really good stuff. And Ryan, I've known Ryan for probably, 12 years now.
I think we started following each other back in like 2010, 2011 around there.
Yeah. I've known Ryan a long time, and he puts out fantastic stuff. The one thing getting Uber Hansen, a buddy of mine, he even said himself that he met Ryan one time, and Ryan was willing to give him hints and tips and little tricks to become a better writer and how to put out good content. I mean, he's just good people. And that's one thing I've been trying to do is get good quality people, good Buffalo people on this show, because it's great to spotlight who's putting out good content. But again, this has been the Buffalo Late Night. I am Thomas DeLoss. I appreciate everybody who stops in, and I hope to see you guys very, very soon. We got some great stuff coming up. We got some good giveaways coming up with Travis Matthew and some potential other sponsors. Again, want to thank our two sponsors, Travis Matthew and A Dentist for Kids. Again, have a great night, and go Bills.
The Bills make me wanna shout. Kick your heels up and shout. Throw your hands up and shout. Throw your head back